Hey everybody and welcome back. Several months ago I spent some time in self-inflicted isolation to escape from the excesses of city life. However, it turns out that having only birds and trees for neighbors gets really lonely, so I moved back into town and spent an in-game year trying to turn trash into treasure. Not only did I fail, but I also found out that my only friend and dear companion Kent was not the man I thought I knew. So I threw it all away, again, to move to the quarry. I plan to return to my ascetic roots and live a life of reflective solitude, but I corrupted my save file when I was messing with some video ideas. So all of that is gone now. My relationship with Kent, the reassuring presence of Mr. Blue Jay. I am well and truly alone now, but at least I was able to cheat and give my stuff back. I find it paradoxically comforting to start with nothing yet again. It's like there are no expectations, no pre-existing standards to hold myself to. I'm here in the world, living the way that I want, and not even Mayor Lewis can stop me this time because there are no festivals in the mountain map. The biggest downside to this refresh of the game world is that the quarry was quite full by the end of 2 years in my previous file. Now it's an empty shell of itself. We've traded places, it seems. Where I was an empty shell of a man before, now I'm full of vigor and a lust for life. We will see how long that lasts. My first couple of days were bog standard. I cleared the quarry and installed some basic machinery. I would once again be using the automate mod to free me of some of the more mundane tasks during my sojourn. While it might build character to smelt metal bars in front of a hot furnace all day, I didn't really want to do that. I considered manipulating the very fabric of reality itself to hunt for clay to make money, but I decided that a relentless search for material wealth didn't quite fit the vision I had for my stay in the quarry. Also, I couldn't find any clay immediately, and I get easily frustrated. The depths of the quarry itself called to me instead. I knew this was a dangerous siren song. I had nothing but farming implements to defend myself, and the monsters within were horrific, ungodly things, hell-bent on destroying me and everything I held dear. They would raze the village and salt the fields, forever cursing the land I lived in. Generations from now, people would say, if only Leapalot hadn't entered the quarry mines and released those foul abominations upon us. They would curse me for untold millennia. So I decided to go into the cave on day 2. If you've ever heard the myth of the Greek king Sisyphus and his endless task of rolling a boulder uphill for eternity, you might find a parallel to my first few attempts in the mines. I have done many boring and mundane tasks in my life, but fighting slimes with a scythe is not a punishment I would wish on anyone. You see, iron slimes have over 200 hit points. My scythe deals about 2 points of damage on average. If the scythe actually depleted my energy, I would have passed out well before killing 2 of the blasted things. As it stands, the only resource that I drained in this test of arms was my own mental fortitude. Should I continue to fight the slimes on the off chance that they dropped a piece of iron, or in the case of copper slimes, copper? I'll be honest, dear viewer, this was not very fun. The slimes could drop some very inexpensive items, but no weapons. If I were to progress further into the mine, I would need something to defend myself with. I only hoped I could find a weapon in the boxes down here. I checked the cave, day after day, hoping to find even a butter knife, but it was no use. Above ground, my plans were crawling forward at a pace that would make a snail weep. There were some trees sprouting from the ground, but here I was without any fiber, and at only level 1 foraging, it wouldn't have mattered, even if I had the ingredients for tree fertilizer. I would simply have to be patient. But patience is not a strength of mine. My strengths are more ethereal. Things like good hygiene, kindness, and a general desire to do good. I could practice none of those things in the quarry, especially not good hygiene. So I spent my days breaking rocks and smelting more bars for no apparent reason. I couldn't use them, couldn't sell them, but the tiny hamster wheel of progress in my head would not let me stop. So I continued gathering coal, and the fires of industry burned ever brighter. About 3/4 of the way through spring, I came to 2 important realizations. First, that I was wasting valuable forage spots by leaving my Junimo plush on the grass, and second, that I was never going to find a weapon in the mines. I had harvested a single salmonberry earlier in the month, and with that and my newly found horseradish, I was feeling confident in making a push toward the depths of the cave. You see, there's an alternative to finding an actual weapon. I could simply acquire the golden scythe. The golden version of this simple farming tool deals 13 damage instead of my average of 2. That would dramatically cut down the amount of time needed to kill iron slimes from roughly 100 hits to merely 15 or 16. The only problem with this brilliant plan was that there were creatures far more terrifying than the slimes in the depths of the quarry mines. The floating skulls were a menace, to be sure, between their unpredictable, strangely bat-like flight patterns, to the fact that I knocked them back roughly halfway across the screen with each attack. Fighting even one was exasperation manifest. But there's a spot near the end of the cave where they seem to congregate. I had some small amount of healing, and I considered it, but the risks were too great. If I did succumb to these beasts, who would save me? Kent? I think not. Better to bide my time and continue searching for more healing items and gear. On spring 23rd, a monumental event occurred. My first tree had completely grown. I had found a few spare pieces of wood in the quarry cave, so I attached a chest to the tree, hoping to automate the harvesting of any seeds it might offer. This was such an occasion that I decided to take the rest of the day off and promptly went to sleep at 6:50 a.m. The next day, another tree had grown. I still had a couple planks left, so I shifted all of my gear further into the quarry. I made a small assembly line to connect the furnace and recycling machine to this tree and chest. I felt a stirring somewhere deep inside here. This was comforting, familiar. Something about making these small incremental upgrades to my layout satisfies me at a very basic level. It's hard to explain, but if you've ever done something as simple as change out your old light bulbs for new LEDs, you might have an inkling of what I mean. The following day, though, was a day of wonder. My continued trips into the mines thus far had produced a few valuables, but I was still struggling to defend myself. I could knock back a slime or two and potentially escape from the haunted skulls, but I was certainly the prey and not the predator in the mines. That would change today. I found a steel falchion in the mines. Falchion? Falcon? I don't know. I had been hoping, without hope, that I would find something down here. A dagger, an iron club, but this was a fabulous find. I was awash with newfound courage and decided to tackle the depths of the cavern that very day. I baited the individual skulls out at first, drawing them forward to be slain on their own, but I was concerned by the amount of skulls awaiting me before the final room. I decided, as I often do in moments of fear or panic, to simply charge in. I dashed for the golden scythe, snatched it from the hands of the statue, then made this cute little face at the floating skulls, taunting them on my way out. I had done it. I had collected the golden scythe. Honestly, I kinda wasn't really sure what else to do now. I decided, ultimately, that I would continue to expand my small garden in the quarry and sharpen my combat skills. I couldn't farm, couldn't fish, and the trees were growing so painfully slowly that my only real options were combat and mining. Since I had only a standard pickaxe, and since quarry mines rocks still took me 5 hits to break, it felt only natural that I focus on my combat prowess. I would rid the mines of these dangerous, terrible creatures and protect the poor simple villagers above. They had no idea the sacrifices I was making. Day in and day out, I would dive into the cave, exterminating everything in my sight. As time passed, I found myself growing more confident in my newfound skills. Spring rolled into summer, and I realized that there was a quiet peace hiding underneath the ear-rending screams of the haunted skulls. And each day, when the monsters had been put to rest, I felt a calm comfort in the fact that I was doing good. It turns out that I could practice my strengths here, not the good hygiene part, but the doing good thing. Surely the systematic slaughter of an entire population of haunted skulls could only benefit the valley, right? One strange concern I had, though, was that I found a skeletal hand fossil while I was down here. 2 things about this bothered me. For one, it's the only artifact that you can get in the backwoods, and I didn't find one after spending an entire year digging up every tile of dirt on that map. And 2, the haunted skulls just don't have hands. Where did that hand come from? Was that skull just holding a skeletal hand in its mouth and flying around at me? Why? When I found a prehistoric skull the next day, I was less concerned. This makes sense, the skull dropped a skull, but what was with that hand? I won't say I was driven to find the answer because my attention span didn't allow for that, but I was very confused for at least 2 days. The next day, a skull dropped a set of clothing, and I had an epiphany. I was no longer a trash man. This dark highlight shirt reminded me of a martial artist's gear. And truly that was what I was at this point. I was a warrior. So for the first time I doffed my trash shirt and donned a new set of clothing. I would study the blade now. I don't know where that skull was keeping this shirt, but I quickly forgot about it as I focused on my new obsession. I threw myself into the caves after that with reckless abandon.
I would power through the skulls and slimes, clearing the way and leveling up my combat ability. On summer 2nd, I found another weapon to add to my collection, the Dark Sword. This was the weapon I had hoped to find from the skulls, but in honesty, my falchion was just as useful for most situations. The one advantage of the Dark Sword, though, was that it had the vampiric enchantment. That meant I could sometimes recover hit points after slaying a monster. Now I could afford to be even more reckless in fights, knowing that I could recoup some of my lost vitality. I found myself switching between the two weapons as the circumstances required. I was becoming, well, not great at combat, but better. But man, it's like the game really wanted me to lean into the edgy vibes.
So I did lean into it. The next several days were a blur, as I mostly spent the time cultivating my small garden in the quarry. I expanded my automatic tree-shaking assembly line, but it had yet to produce much. I continued to traverse the quarry cave and found some various gems and jewels, and a completely useless dwarf scroll. Wow! But I also expanded my collection of dangerous killing implements by finding a burglar's shank only moments later. I was becoming a well-rounded killing machine, and my stats were starting to reflect it. On summer 11th, I finally hit combat level 5. Honestly, that's pretty quick. In a casual playthrough, I might not even be at combat 5 yet this early in the game. I was proud of myself, but I felt somewhat unfulfilled. I had no one to share this victory with. I spent the next week or so simply tending my garden, but things came to a head on summer 21st. All my time training with the blade culminated here. I executed a perfect parry and riposte twice, and I realized that I had nothing left to master. It was time for me to leave my self-imposed exile. After all, I said it earlier, there was no one here to direct my course. I was a free man with no master. I would take the various goods that I had found and sell them off, to start anew somewhere else. This roaming life was getting lonely. Might be time for me to make some friends. But first, let's find out just how much I can make from half a year in the quarry. It's kind of challenging to sell things when you live in the quarry. I could use my chair to get out, but it was the only one I had, and it would be kind of difficult to return without it, so instead I opted to just give myself 999 mini shipping bins and attach some to my assembly line here. In the end, all of my struggles, the broken bones and bloody lips were worth a mere 6,270 gold, so that was kind of a waste of time.